Petty revenge. Not so psychic. Short one. Many years ago, I lived in New York City. One day during rush hour, I was caught up in the throng of people crowding the sidewalk when, out of the blue, a fortune teller ran into the crowd, grabbed my hand and said, "Would you like me to tell your fortune?" For once, I said the right thing at the right time. I blurted out, "If you were really psychic, you'd know the answer to that," and walked on, listening to chortles of laughter bursting out from the people around me. Thinking about it now, 40 years later, it still makes me laugh. Petty revenge. Don't clean the kitchen. Guess supper will be very late then. I have teenagers and a hubby who works from home. I work a demanding job with fairly long hours, but I don't mind cooking when I get back as I enjoy it and can whip up a meal in under 20 min if I need to. So the deal is, I'll cook and hubby and kids get clean-up duty. The problem is that they're all extremely messy and aren't at all bothered by a dirty, messy kitchen, whereas a dirty kitchen is the one thing that really upsets me. So after a long, hard day at work, I'd get back to a filthy, dirty kitchen and have to clean it before I could start cooking. I got tired of nagging and screaming. It just elevated my stress levels. So I would get some food at work, arrive home, sit on the couch and read my book. After a while, someone would ask what was for supper. I would say, "I don't know, I can't really do much in a dirty kitchen," and carry on reading my book. I would not end up cooking that evening as it got too late, and everyone else would have to have cheese on toast, much to their disgust. Now, when I get home, the kitchen is spotless and the dishwasher on. Problem solved. Petty revenge. Sent a sexy message from my boss to a customer. I used to work at a restaurant that functioned as a bar in the evenings. The brunch was always super busy, but the evenings were always dead, and that was my bartending shift. For context, my nickname was 2650, on account of the fact that one evening I sold 2650 highs with of booze over 6 hours. People rarely came in. Because of this, I was often tasked with doing prep for the brunch rush the next morning. Cracking eggs, peeling potatoes, and of course roll-ups. For the uninitiated, when you go to a restaurant and they give you your cutlery rolled up in a napkin, that's a roll-up. And someone does hundreds of those by hand. My boss was generally a jerk, who seemingly enjoyed tasking me with shitty jobs, toilets and such, and had been a particular prick that evening before he left. The restaurant was small, and I knew he'd be slinging brunch the next morning. So in one of the roll-ups, I wrote something along the lines of, "I think you're hot. Would you go out with me? Check one. Yes. No." Then included his phone number. Then put it in the pile to go out the next morning during the rush and went home. The next morning, I got a text reading, "You are such a goddamn motherfucker." That was awesome, but still, you are a motherfucker. Apparently a couple had walked in, and he'd given the roll-up in question to the guy, who was super weirded out and confused, asking if it was for him or his girlfriend. My boss had no concept of what was happening, so he was equally weirded out by this guy handing him this napkin with his own phone number on it. It was apparently amazing. Petty revenge. Abusive ex refused to move out, so I did it for her in the most inconvenient way possible. I was inspired to share this after reading the top post today. I had broken up with my ex about a year prior to this event, but she wouldn't move out. One excuse after another for a solid year until one day, amidst yet another argument, she finally admitted her plan was to stay indefinitely and threatened to claim domestic abuse if I did anything about it. That weekend, she decided to go out for one of her weekend vacations with a girlfriend. So I took advantage of the 48 hours I had and got to work reserving a storage unit and rented a moving truck. I worked around the clock loading that truck multiple times, only sleeping a few hours that entire weekend. She had hoarding tendencies that I had long turned a blind eye to, had to pick my battles, and it had gotten pretty far out of control. Not only did I make dozens of trips, but the storage unit itself was almost too small for it all. It was truly amazing how much crap she had managed to pack floor to ceiling in multiple rooms, closets and the garage, despite living in the same house together for so long. I made sure her laptop was the very first thing in the storage unit all the way in the back corner, followed by all of her clothes, so many fucking clothes, then furniture, then all the meaningless hoarded junk. By the time I was done, that storage unit was packed floor to ceiling, to the point I had to really Tetris the last couple of loads in there just to get the door shut. She was right at the end of a semester of school and not only needed the laptop first thing the next week, she was also planning on leaving for a cross-state road trip to visit family, and everything she needed for that was at the very back. From what I heard, it took her and a friend the better part of the week to find that laptop and repack the storage unit. She missed some important deadlines at school and delayed her family trip by a whole week, which messed up other plans and wasted a few PTO days at work to boot. The best part came months later, you see, when she first came back from that little weekend vacation. I had asked her to sign a receipt to receive the key to the storage unit. She immediately refused, threw a fit, tried to steal my dog, failed, tried breaking into my house while I was gone, then came back hours later with about 6 cops in her wake. To this day, I don't know what lies she told them to get that entourage, but after I explained my side of the story, they realized it was just a civil matter and quickly left. The receipt I asked her to sign was simple enough, in that I offered to pay for the storage unit for 6 months if she signed it that day. But since she didn't, I removed my card from the account and put the unit in her name. Only problem was, the card she then put on file with them was an authorized user card linked to my account, which I promptly cancelled, so then she missed enough payments on the storage unit that they locked her out and she was never able to get the rest of her stuff before they presumably auctioned it all off. Petty revenge. Karma will get you. Years ago, in a small grocery store parking lot in a ski town, I was parked in a spot and someone parked in a fire lane, perpendicularly behind me, leaving about 3 feet for me to back up. There was no way I could back up and leave. That person happened to leave their car running, so I hopped in and moved it enough so that I could get out. It's bad for the environment to leave your car running, so I turned their car off for them. I also did them the favor of locking their car so that someone else wouldn't just move it like I did. After all, someone else might take it. So I did them the kind favor of locking their car with the keys in it when I left. Petty revenge. MOSQUITO. My father was a physically abusive my entire life, often beating me with whatever he could reach, including an enamel pot, belts, wooden spoons, sticks, tent poles, and then mocking me for crying. I left for college at 17 and only went back home when I had nowhere else to go after that. Many years later, in a time frame that I was doing my best to be a good human, he was at my small ranch in his own trailer when I had a family reunion. He wanted to ride one of my horses, which I refused as politely as possible. I was showing him my tack room and a mosquito landed on his forehead, so I smacked the crap out of it. The look on his face, and I had the little carcass to show him, and a riding crop in the other hand, still makes me laugh. He died from sepsis due to constipation on his death cert. No lie. So he officially went out full of SHT. Petty revenge. My teacher thought they knew my name better than me. This was years ago now when I was in secondary school around 15 years old. We used to have form in the morning where the teacher would take the register and let you know about anything going on in the school before you went to your other classes. My form tutor was a miserable old woman that was a renowned arsehole. There were several stories I could tell about her, but this one is the only time I got the better of her. My parents named me a shortened version of posh-sounding name. For the sake of the story, let's say they called me Alex, which is short for Alexander. Whenever this woman would call my name, she would always use Alexander. I brought up to her that it was not my name multiple times and asked her to please call me Alex, as that's what my parents called me. She would always get angry and tell me, "Don't be stupid, no one is named Alex. Your name is Alexander. Alex is just what you want to be called." No matter how much I insisted, she refused. At one point, she gave me a detention for asking her to call me my correct name. The school called to let my parents know I had been given a detention for arguing with NY teacher. When I told my parents I was supposed to have a detention for asking my teacher to call me the right name, they were not happy. So they gave me a trump card to use against her my birth certificate. The next day when she called my name, I once again told her that wasn't my name. She threatened me with another detention, so I pulled out the birth certificate, put it down on her desk and said, "My birth certificate says my name is Alex, so that's what you will call me, thanks." The look on her face was priceless, and she started calling me my actual name for the rest of the time I was in her class. Petty revenge. High school bully regrets decision. I'm 52, and I still think about this moment from high school. I had English class with this entitled preppy a-hole. He was cocky and mean, and made fun of my overweight shy friend in class. He was basically just a pick and sat right in front of me. He was constantly leaning his head back onto my desk, and I kept asking him to stop. I told him if he did it one more time, he'd regret it. I had a newly sharpened pencil, and I held it tip up on my desk. When he leaned back, he stabbed himself in the head, and just as I said, he instantly learned not to do it again. I realize now that could have been dangerous, but at 17 I didn't think about it. According to people I know in my hometown, he's still an asshole, so it didn't do any permanent damage. It's given me permanent joy though, lol. Petty revenge. Gifting daughter presents meant for husband's side piece. Posted in another thread. Suggested to post here. Backstory. Back in 2018, we went on a Christmas trip to see my now ex-husband's Joe's sister Jill. He was acting strange and would not talk to me. His sister, whom I only met one time before, ignored me. I was wrapping presents we had sent to Jill's and Joe, and Jill went outside for an period. When we went to pack up, Joe was very concerned about his backpack. Only he could touch it. I thought this is odd, but whatever. A month prior to leaving, I found a prepaid card in his wallet. I took it to see what he would say. He asked about it and said it was for work. I found it and gave it back to him. About a week later, I asked if he was having an affair. He said no and I dropped it. We have not been in love for quite a while, and I knew we were heading towards divorce. Upon return from trip, something told me to look in his backpack. So while he was showering, I looked and found 2 bracelets and a gift bag. I took the 2 bracelets and hid them. All was well until he went to car to leave. He came storming in, demanding I give the bracelets back. I simply replied, "What bracelets?" He said he bought them for me for our anniversary next month. He knows I don't wear bracelets and actually hate them. Why would he be freaking out if the bracelets were for me a month later? He's storming out and we didn't talk about it again. I was finally able to get in his phone and discovered texts messages confirming the affair. Revenge. 2 years later, we are divorcing. I am cleaning our rooms, helping him pack. While cleaning, I found the 2 bracelets I had hid years ago and forgot about. I didn't want them, but our middle child F15 loves jewelry. We were separated, but decided to have Christmas at the house together. So Christmas morning comes and kids are opening gifts. The look on Joe's face as our daughter opens the bracelets was priceless. They were rose gold. Her favorite. Her face was beaming with joy. He sat there looking at the jewelry like a deer in headlights. Edit, some have strong feelings about gifting bracelets to my daughter and her feelings if she finds out. I have no intention of telling her. Joe will not say anything. He denies the affair completely when talking to other people. He has also since abandoned the kids. He moved out of state without telling them and only contacts them on holidays and birthdays. The only way she would find out is if I would tell her. We stayed married for those 2 years for financial purposes. Petty revenge. Every religion I could find. Years ago, I was working as a cook in an upscale restaurant in Calgary. At the time, my family was still living back east before they moved west. I had a week off, so I flew home to see the wife and kids. When I came back, someone had filled my toolbox, full of all my knives, etc., with gelatin. So not only were they suspended in gelatin, but the gelatin was rotting because it sat there for a week. I found out pretty quickly who it was. Typical class clown. I didn't say anything to him, but over the period of a month, I found out everything I could about the guy. Full name, address, phone, postal code, social insurance number, email. Everything. So after saying nothing for a month, I was ready. I went online and signed him up for every religion I could find. And not just what we think of as legitimate Western religions. I mean all of them. Church of Satan, Hare Krishnas, Catholic, Protestant, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, everything. About a week later, he starts complaining about all the religious mail he was getting, and he couldn't figure out why. His roommate was my supervisor. He figured out it was me, but he also said he wouldn't tell the guy because he was having too much fun watching his reactions. Then the visit started. JW wouldn't leave him alone. Mormons kept banging on the door, some cults came visiting, they even had the Hare Krishnas dancing on their front lawn. He thought it might be me, but nobody ever confirmed it. He tried to get me to respond, but I was always able to keep a straight face. The restaurant got sold and closed shortly after that. I have no idea if he ever found out it was me. Petty revenge. Line cutters at a resort hotel breakfast buffet. Until 3 days ago, I was staying at a nice resort hotel in the Philippines. There were a lot of families there from many ethnicities, as the local Cebuanos could not afford this hotel. I was in line at the omelette-making station when one woman who wasn't in line walks up to the person in front of me and says something in their shared language. "Can I cut in behind you? It's a long line." For brigading reasons, I'm not going to say what language it was, but suffice it to say, I speak enough of that language to know what they were doing. I was surprised because, besides me, there were only 4 people behind me and 3 people in front. Anyway, she successfully cuts in. I was thinking of saying something, but instead I got petty. She got to the front of the line and filled up a small plate with the omelette fixings she wanted and passed the plate to the cook. She cooks it up, no problem. Then it's my turn. As the line cutter's getting her omelette back, she notices that I took the crispy bacon from another station and shredded them behind her, and had added it to my omelette fixings plate. I can see the envy already, but I decide to be pettier. I ask the omelette chef in my politest voice, "May I have some cheese, please?" The line cutter woman's eyes kinda went big when she realized she could have had cheese, which wasn't really an option at the fixing station, but I'd seen others ask the day before, and bacon on her basic-ass omelette. To top it off, at least 2 of the people behind me started ordering the same, from what I saw. I hope it caught on. And the omelette was frigging delicious. Take that, you line cutter. Petty revenge. Lab demanded I go over my required time to swap my SIM card to Lab's router, so it cost them thousands. Before I start, I should say the manager I mentioned frequently made irrational and uninformed demands of those under them, and expected them to be executed immediately with minimal questions. To keep this post shorter, I won't list all the instances I still remember, but just the revenge part. While back, I was working at a lab that only had internet access by a cellular router. It was a pretty good connection, and allowed for nice upload-download speeds over the weekends when no one was on it. So people liked to save their data transfers for Friday afternoon. The main lab internet had unlimited data plans, but when all staff were on site, it would be slow and some would complain, especially if people started their data transfers early. In addition to the main connection, some people such as myself had a personal lines and routers. Mine had a limited plan 3 GB per month, since I was just using it for infrequent remote SSH sessions. It was a Friday afternoon, and I was already over my 40 hours unpaid since salary, so I packed up and was walking out the door. As I walked out the door, a manager demanded I stay to put more different SIMs into the router to see how data transfers were impacted over the weekend and speeds during the week. I explained we didn't have unlimited SIMs available, and if we did activate one, it would take time to get a connection. So they said to use the one assigned to me since I wouldn't need it for the weekend, and I can activate a new one to be ready when I came back in. I told them it was a limited plan, and before I could explain anything else, they said to just do it. So I activated myself a new one, put the limited plan, SIM into the main labs router and left for the weekend, knowing there would be large data transfers that weekend. Well, Monday comes and the manager never says anything about it, and neither did I. A few more days pass, and they ask me to check out the data usage speeds on the SIM. I gave them the numbers and found of the nearly 2 TB of data moved, almost 700 GB was on that 3 GB limited plan. What they didn't let me explain was that the limited plans have a 10 GB overage fee. So this demand cost nearly $7,000 in a week. After this, the manager was much more receptive to her underlings' input. TLDR annoying manager demanded we use my limited SIM for large file transfers. Cost company $7,000 in a few days. Petty revenge. All over a $60 internet bill. Oh boy. There is some backstory here to give some context. I'm currently renting a house from my niece's father, who is currently serving a small prison sentence. I rented the house because I was in need of a place to stay, and he was running out of time to get his house ready for tenants. He had been remodeling before he was locked up and sent to county jail for 7 months, until he was sentenced. It was livable, but there is unfinished flooring, needs some trim, the temporary plywood countertops need real ones. Installed, doors are broken and need replacing, etc. Mostly smaller work, considering I'm a contractor and I could blow these jobs out fast, and the idea was to take the work off the rent. Inmate's mother is who I am dealing with for paying rent. The inmate and I discussed rent to be $1,600. This would include covering the mortgage, water, sewer, and internet service. All of these items are fixed cost, meaning they do not fluctuate like gas and electric will, so I pay those direct with the bill that comes to the house. Along with this, I would do some of the work around here while he was gone. Specifically speaking on the internet, we discussed it would be easier for him to not have to pay to cancel his service and have it taken from the rent, especially considering we do not get a physical bill sent to the house. The bill only shows up on the app that is on the phone in inmate's mother's possession. Here's where things get crazy. Few days ago, the internet was out, so I messaged his mother and let her know. When she was able to respond, she informed me the bill hadn't been paid and proceeds to send me the monthly statements. At that point, I explained what our agreement was. She isn't hearing any of it, refuses to believe this was the agreement. I simply don't want to pay for something I was under the impression I already paid for. Not to mention, I don't even have access to the bill to pay it. And if I have to ask you for the bill every month, it doesn't make sense. I'll just get my own service. Pretty simple situation. Well, that is exactly what I did. This conversation with inmate's mother took place at 7 p.m. I was on the phone with a new internet service provider by 8 p.m. and had install set for the next day by 9 a.m. Installer came early and I had internet by 9:15 a.m. Well, now you will pay for those outstanding statements yourself, and you'll be paying the company $300 contract cancellation fee. Also, any of the work I was planning on doing, I will now invoice time and material at $75 raw. Still cheaper than I bill out. The money is peanuts to me. I don't care about the $60, I just wanted to have a civil discussion about it. Even after all of this, I'm actually paying more because I'm not subtracting the original internet service from rent. Admittedly, where I screwed up was not getting it in writing before this guy went to prison. But it's whatever. I found a solution and moved on. Petty revenge. Are you contagious? About 1.5 years ago, I, female 40, was diagnosed with ocular shingles. I don't recommend. Part of the healing process is the scabbing over of the blisters, which were present on my eyelid, eyebrow, and forehead on one side. In accordance with medical direction, I was not contagious once the scabbing started, and it was about 5 days after the onset of scabbing when the fateful encounter occurred. I woke up that morning like any other morning except for the hideous scabbing makeup not recommended. I could not wear a baseball cap to hide face since the scabs were painful to the touch. And you don't want to touch them because of the threat of scarring if they come off too soon. So I put a hoodie on and hoped that would make me not stand out so much. I kept my head down while shopping in my local grocery store and avoided eye contact and communication. As I'm at the self-checkout line, I hear a voice from behind me yell my name. I turned around so confused that someone recognized me and realized it was my mom's cousin, female 65, who was the checker on the first check stand next to the self-checkout. Before I could even say hi, she blurts out loudly in front of 10 other people checking out, and about 10 more people in line, "I am surprised to see you here. Aren't you contagious?" I was mortified, but mostly annoyed because I had just started ringing up my cart. I respond, "It's not contagious. Thanks for your concern," and I turned back around, ignoring whatever she said after. This woman is known for having zero filter and sticks her nose in other people's business on the regular. So then I had people leaving their self-checkouts before they are done and just walking out and leaving their food to avoid me. Other people stared and shook their heads. I finished ringing myself up and left. Fast forward to yesterday. I recently became friends with someone who works with her, and I saw him last night. I decided to tell him a juicy little bit of knowledge that she is embarrassed about and has always been insecure about. She had to have a skin graft on her shin years ago, and they used cadaver foreskin. She used to complain about it because hair never grows on that patch, lol, free laser. Her new name is Dick Shin now, and when he asks her about it, he's going to ask if they tested it for STDs and if she is contagious. It's only fair. Petty revenge. Speeding in a school zone, I'll make sure you're late. I was on my typical morning commute when I got to a school zone in my small suburban town. For some context, this road in particular is normally 45 meters normally, and people ignoring the school zone signs and nearly hitting a kid is common because of the combination of the high school starting really early and people trying to rush to get to their jobs in the city. The high school always has groups of runners crossing the two busy intersections along this road. So when I see reckless drivers come so close to these kids, it lights a desire in me for petty revenge. This morning I was going 20 mph through the school zone, with all the other cars doing what they are supposed to, when out of nowhere, a car came speeding by, going at least 15 mph above the speed limit. Luckily, this gremlin of a woman got held up at the next intersection in front of me, so I got a good chance to memorize what the car looked like so I can enact my petty revenge. Everything seemed to fall in place for this revenge. I was behind them, they were going the same direction as me towards the city for work, and despite them cutting off people and switching lanes, they never went out of my line of sight, and I end up behind them again as we go onto the highway. As we are getting on the highway, they nearly collide with a truck who is trying to legally merge with a blinker into the freeway ramp, just because they don't want to let them in. So it only solidifies this person is worthy of a little petty revenge. Once on the highway, I safely make my way over to the far left lane, and guess who is behind me? The gremlin, who likes to speed in school zones so she isn't late. Traffic was going slow except for the far left lane, so I was able to slow down to 5 below the speed limit and still be side to side with all the other cars in traffic. The gremlin was stuck behind me, going slow for the next 10 miles while I blast Dumbass by Dennis Stephen Wright with the windows down. I left with plenty of time to get to work, so this didn't affect me in the least. The look of anger on their face in the rearview mirror made it all worth it. Petty revenge. Date ended in an unexpected way. Years ago, I went on a date with a girl I met on Match.com. We had been messaging back and forth for a good few days, and we were getting on great. Had a phone call or two thrown in there as well. She seemed laid back, fun, and pretty easy to talk to. After about 5 days of messaging back and forth, we arranged to meet up in the city for our first face-to-face date. As we had been getting on so well, we decided to go for a meal at a nice restaurant, rather than the coffee dates that I'd been trying this far with other potential matches. So I booked the table long before COVID, so no credit card taken, and we met up at the restaurant. I got a feeling early on that I maybe didn't meet her expectations, looks-wise. She seemed a little somber at the start of the date, but we soldiered on, and she seemed to relax, and we started to have fun. Also, I thought. She was pouring the wine into herself all through the meal. I thought she was nervous, but she got herself a bit drunk. After the main course, she excused herself to the toilet. Less than a minute later, I got a text from her in the bathroom. This date is rubbish, he's brutally ugly, and I'm not having fun. Can you call me in about 5 minutes, and I'll pretend there's an emergency? She had clearly not meant to send this to me, but in her drunken state had just started typing on the last message she sent. She messaged me to say she was on her way before the date started. I beckoned the waiter over as I pulled my coat on and told her, "My wife has gone to the bathroom and I've just had a call from work. There's an emergency I have to deal with. She has the credit card, she will square up the bill." I walked out and didn't look back. Blocked her number as well. Edited to remove autocorrect mistakes. Petty revenge. Gave my ex a surprise when I left unexpectedly. My ex and I were planning on separating. It was a toxic relationship. He was a controlling narcissist, and I had been under his thumb for far too long. I was in counseling, and my therapist and I mapped out the best way for me to get out. Although the details of the plan were my idea. I got a better paying job. I opened my own bank account that was a huge fight. And I figured out where to go. He knew I was leaving, and he even went through the house and marked all of the things that were his that I couldn't take with me, which was basically everything we purchased throughout our 13 years together. I was only allowed to take the items that I came with when we moved in together. He planned to take the day off from work on a particular Saturday and would be there to supervise my move to ensure that I only took what he approved. That's where my plan began. The Saturday before his planned date, I scheduled to move after he left for work. He worked long days, so I knew I could pack and leave before he returned. About an hour after he left, my friends and family showed up with boxes and tape and a moving truck. I parked it out back so my neighbors didn't see it. In less than 4 hours, all of my belongings were packed and on the truck, and I pretty much stuck to his rules because I didn't want reminders of our life in my future. Before I left in the truck, I went through and grabbed every single towel, washcloth, sheet, toilet paper, paper towel, napkin, and tissue. I took anything and everything that he could wipe his butt or his nose with. And I took the carpet runner that was at the front door, leaving the tape that secured it to the floor. That way he knew as soon as he walked in that I was gone. Imagine coming home from work after a long day, expecting one thing and finding another, and then not having a single tissue or toilet paper to use. My best revenge was building a happy new life, but that day made me feel so good. Edit for those who care, yes, actually diagnosed. We were originally in therapy together. I forgot to add that he deemed the bed as his, so I couldn't take it. But he never mentioned the mattress and box spring, which I also took. Petty revenge. Big bro to the rescue. A little background. I work in an industry that uses almost exclusively unionized labor, with the workplace ran by an office of non-unionized managers of a sort. I work in a fairly specialized capacity because of my licensure, where I basically spend long stretches of time with nothing to do. However, when I am needed, it's very, very urgent. The managers often think that because of this, my position is an unnecessary expense, and proceed to treat us as such. So, at this particular point in time, I 33M am working with my younger cousin, let's call her N27F, are working in the same capacity. I've always looked at her as a younger sister and always looked after her growing up. But she didn't really need it here. She was an ace at her job. But even so, there was one particular person in the office, the second highest ranking manager, D57F, that absolutely hated N. N had some social anxiety, but was very good with people. And even given the emergent nature of our work, she always kept a cool head. Unless that's as D was around. D always went out of her way to make sure she found something wrong with something N was doing, even though we are licensed. And she had no idea what she was talking about. It was infuriating, and started bowing up to D whenever N was involved. This obviously made me a target as well, but I don't mind. I worked retail through college and have a ridiculously thick skin. Until, one day, she tried to get me to break the law on the clock. My job involves filling out and handling confidential documents containing personal information as a part of its functions. The laws surrounding what I am allowed to prohibited from turning over to my employer are complicated, and I have spent years learning them. D asked for information she was not entitled to, and I refused. She threatened my job. I stood strong. She dropped it after verbally berating me. It wasn't until she went off on N again that I had had enough. I put my plan into motion. You see, D was required to be on hand in a workspace where it was imperative that outside sound was kept to a minimum. This was right after the first Apple Watch came out, and all of the office was wearing them. It was the last week of this job before we started a new one. We're gig workers, so I put my plan into action. I went on Google and searched valuable Pokemon cards. Lo and behold, I found the great image of all the Gen 1 halos in a sleeve. Saved. Went to Craigslist with a burner email and posted under the guise of an empty nester who had come across these after cleaning out her son's room. He got into college. Isn't that something? I said that I had no idea what they were with and just wanted to sell them for $40, OBO. Then typed her phone number into the bottom line of the ad, with words for the numbers. Then I walked to the work floor and proceeded to watch my deed unfold. Just as I had guessed, Dee had been in a big dick energy mood that morning and hadn't silenced her cell phone or Apple Watch. A double blessing from gods of mischief. It went dead as silent to a mix of an downright offensive electronic ringing, mixed with phone speakers, blaring the hoo Part of You Make My Dream Come True by Hall & Oates. Now, important detail, our work floor always had visitors from other branches of the company with exotic job titles, like unit manager, coordinator, executive VP of, director of. You get the idea. Those guys technically have no authority over me, but I'll be damned if Dee isn't very concerned with keeping these people happy. Their reactions to this interruption is less than friendly. At this point, Dee goes into full panic mode I had never seen before. She starts swatting at her phone trying to turn it off. She finally walks away and answers. I couldn't make out the conversation, but overheard the words, "What? Pokemon." Don't call in, very irritated whispers. She hangs up the phone as aggressively as you can with an iPhone, with intention of rejoining the group, only to be stopped. Stopped in her tracks again by her shrieking wrist and hoo. This time, every head turns back in incredulous anger. You can see Dee isn't drowning. I almost felt bad for her. She walks off at a furious pace, answering the phone with the most polite hello she could manage. She walks through the door, and I overhear her say, "What goddamn Pokemon cards?" N has been standing next to me the entire time and has noticed the deranged look of glee on my face. She knows it was me. When we got back to our office, I show her the ad and we lose it. We get the hysterical laughter out of system and walk back to the floor, only to see Dee standing there with everyone, fuming about what had happened. She's pissed, but she can't direct it at anyone. Came to find out, she put anyone in the office working under her on finding out why she was getting these calls and who was responsible. This freaked N out a little bit, but I wasn't worried. I covered my tracks just fine. In fact, it had the opposite effect. Turns out someone found my ad and flagged it for removal. Touché office. But I wasn't done. So I decided to do a second ad, because why not? This time, I found a picture on Google of a full room-sized replica of the city of Paris, all made out of Legos. Saved. Then I posted an ad offering free Legos with assembly assistance. Back on the floor. Hoo. More angry faces snapping back. More of Dee fumbling her electronic devices. I was damn shocked she hadn't silenced the phone. More angry whispering with mentions Legos. It was glorious. No, they never found out it was me. Loose lips sink ships, and this is the first time I've told this story since then. Dee and I never crossed paths again. Found out she had to take a lower-paying position on her next gig, due to all of the complaints levied against her, pulled with unprofessional behavior on the floor. She was a monster that preyed particularly on women she perceived as younger and prettier than herself, so most women. I had very little to do with her downfall, but the satisfaction of getting a little petty revenge was an astonishingly satisfying position. Moral of the story: be human to those you work with, especially those who work for you. They can fuck your shit up as fast as the person handling your food, and they will fuck your shit up if you go after one of their own. Petty revenge. Set a trap and got the laziest guy fired. A few years ago, I worked at a hospital in the environmental services, where I gathered up the accumulated trash and medical waste to be disposed of. It wasn't a hard job and worked well for someone like me with ADHD, as it involved lots of walking. I could usually get lots of the hospital clear by my lunch break, as we worked in pairs to clear the building, but then we had a new guy come in. His name was Ben. He seemed nice, but soon things began going downhill. I showed up for work one day and the bins were overflowing. Then the next day and the next day were the same. I'd have so much garbage being accumulated that I wouldn't be halfway done with my section by lunch and had no time to get the medical waste taken out. I complained multiple times to management, who were also getting heat for the piling up of waste. We all suspected Ben wasn't doing his job, but we couldn't find proof and he was honestly a good liar. So I decided to set a trap. One Friday, I saw that the bin in one area was overflowing, and that particular wing of the hospital would be closed on the weekend, so the trash wouldn't change. I took a photo of the bin and left it there unattended, knowing Ben would be working the weekend. I came in on Monday and checked the same bin and saw it was exactly the same. I took another photo and showed my boss. Within minutes, she was calling Ben into the office and confronted him. He tried his usual lies, but when I showed the evidence, he just sat there stone-faced. Turns out, he spent most of his day hiding in the hospital and messing around on his phone. He was fired and blackballed from all the departments of the hospital. Felt good knowing I did him in.